After months or years of being on the receiving end of their emotional unavailability, mixed signals, and calculated distance, you finally gave them a taste of their own medicine, and they're completely devastated by how cold and ruthless you became. The person who perfected the art of emotional detachment is now falling apart because you treated them with the same heartless indifference they've been dishing out all along. Their shock at your coldness reveals they never understood how their behavior felt until they experienced it themselves. They never expected their own treatment reflected back. Avoidants are masters of emotional cruelty disguised as self-protection, but they never imagined that someone might eventually treat them with the same calculated coldness they've been providing. When you mirror their energy exactly, being unavailable when they want attention, indifferent when they try to connect, and dismissive when they seek validation, they're shocked by how devastating their own tactics feel. This mirroring shatters them because they suddenly understand viscerally what they've been putting you through for months or years. The confusion, frustration, and emotional whiplash they feel when subjected to their own patterns gives them their first real understanding of the damage they've been causing. They're experiencing their own psychological warfare turned against them, and the emotional violence they've been normalizing suddenly feels unbearable when they're on the receiving end. Their devastation proves they always knew their behavior was harmful. They just thought they'd never have to experience it themselves. Your indifference destroys their ego. The person who spent the relationship being pursued, accommodated, and emotionally catered to is now facing someone who treats them like they're completely ordinary and replaceable. Your indifference to their moods, needs, and attempts at connection obliterates their sense of specialness and importance. This ego destruction is particularly devastating because they built their entire identity around being the person others chase, understand, and work to win over. Your heartless treatment strips away their illusion of being irresistibly mysterious and reveals them as just another person desperate for attention they're not getting. Your refusal to be impressed by their usual charm tactics, manipulated by their emotional games, or affected by their withdrawal strategies, makes them feel powerless and ordinary in ways they've never experienced. They can't handle being treated like everyone else treats them. They're devastated by their own powerlessness. For the first time in their relationship history, they're dealing with someone who won't be controlled, manipulated, or emotionally managed through their usual tactics. Your heartless responses to their attempts at connection leave them feeling completely powerless to affect your emotional state or regain their position of control. This powerlessness is shattering because their entire sense of safety in relationships comes from being able to regulate distance and intimacy according to their comfort level. When you become unreachable and unaffected by their emotional thermostat, they lose their ability to manage the relationship dynamics they've always controlled. They're experiencing true helplessness in relationship dynamics for the first time, and the vulnerability of having no influence over someone they want attention from is more terrifying than any emotional intimacy they've ever avoided. Your emotional unavailability triggers their abandonment wounds. The heartless treatment you're giving them is activating every abandonment, fear, and rejection wound they've spent their lives protecting through emotional distance. Experiencing genuine indifference from someone they care about triggers their deepest psychological traumas in ways they never anticipated. This activation of their core wounds is devastating because they're facing the exact treatment they've been unconsciously expecting all along: abandonment by someone who matters to them. Your heartless behavior confirms their deepest fear that they're not worthy of consistent love and care. The irony isn't lost that their own behavior patterns have created the very abandonment experience they've been trying to avoid. They've trained you to treat them exactly the way their wounded psychology expects to be treated, and experiencing that treatment is destroying them. They can't handle what they've always dished out. Your heartless responses expose their fundamental weakness. They can give emotional coldness, but they can't take it. While they've spent years perfecting the art of being unavailable, distant, and emotionally cruel, they've never developed the capacity to receive that same treatment without falling apart completely. This asymmetry reveals their emotional immaturity and hypocrisy. They expect others to tolerate behavior they can't tolerate themselves, to accept treatment that devastates them when it's directed their way, and to remain loving despite being unloved in return. They're learning that emotional unavailability only works as a strategy when the other person remains emotionally available. When both people become heartless, the dynamic becomes unbearable for someone who needs others to compensate for their own emotional deficits. Your transformation terrifies them. They're shattered not just by how you're treating them now, but by the fact that they've turned someone who used to love them unconditionally into someone capable of such calculated emotional cruelty. Witnessing your transformation from loving to heartless forces them to confront their role in creating this change. This transformation is terrifying because it shows them the power their behavior has to corrupt and damage other people. They've essentially created a monster. By teaching you to be as emotionally unavailable as they are, and seeing their influence reflected in your heartless treatment is deeply disturbing. They're mourning not just the loss of your love, but the loss of who you used to be before their behavior taught you to protect yourself through emotional cruelty. They've destroyed both your love for them and your capacity to love freely. They're experiencing authentic consequences. For the first time, they're facing real consequences for their emotional unavailability, rather than having those consequences absorbed by someone who loves them despite their behavior. Your heartless treatment is showing them what their patterns actually create when they're not buffered by someone else's emotional labor. These authentic consequences are shattering because they reveal what their behavior looks like without someone making excuses for it, working around it, or compensating for its effects. They're seeing their patterns clearly for the first time because you're no longer protecting them from their natural outcomes. The shock of irrelevance. Your heartless indifference makes them feel completely irrelevant to your emotional world in ways that shatter their sense of importance and specialness. They're devastated by discovering they matter so little to you that you can treat them cruelly without apparent guilt or regret. They're shattered by your heartless treatment because they never imagined someone could become as emotionally cold as they've always been. And experiencing their own medicine is revealing just how toxic their behavior has been all along.